In this video, I'm going to tell you all the habits that I have been exercising to help me go from beating the crap out of myself, feeling incapable like I am no good, spending literal months recovering from a fall, to now being able to set boundaries with my parents, making shitty art, and being okay with it. Ignoring what the fuck people are potentially saying about me, and just talking to some cool people randomly in a cafe. That used to scare the living crap out of me. So this is how I am able to be more resilient in my life. Let's talk about these habits. Let's start with the first habit. It's actually to break things down. That sounds a little bit weird, but let me explain. When I'm inspired, I tend to get a little bit too excited. And I tend to be a little bit ambitious and set the highest goal possible because that's where I want to be, right? But the thing is, usually that sets me up for failure because I am literally going from 0 to 100. So, to avoid falling off the wagon and staying on the ground, I have to set smaller goals. I have to set things a lot smaller than I think. So, as an example, if I want to have that habit of reading 20 books a year, I can't start with 20 books a year, okay? That is way too big. So I set the goal to reading 5 pages a day. And sometimes by the 1 week, 2 week mark, my energy is dipping. Okay, that is fucking inevitable. And I realized that even 5 pages a day is still a little bit too big. So then I lower it again to reading only 2 pages a day. If I don't manage to do 2 pages a day, then that is still too big. Boil it down again, 1 page a day. How this actually cultivates resilience is that keeping small promises to yourself builds self-trust. You learn to trust yourself, okay? Because the thing is, you have to be doing these things for a long period of time. And if you set too big of a goal for yourself and then you quote unquote fail, oh my god, this is not fucking Times Square, seriously. If you set a goal that is way too big for yourself, you build this evidence in your brain that every time you set yourself up to do something, you're never able to keep promises to yourself. So that's why we have to set something a lot smaller. Setting small steps makes sure that I keep going. And that is what resilience is, right? Resilience is falling back because that is just a fact of life. You are always going to fall, you're always going to fail, and making sure that you get back up on the horse and you keep going. Giving myself permission to feel. We are not taught how to feel. We did not have the permission to be a fucking human because at the end of the day, humans are emotional creatures. The part of our brain that developed first is the emotional brain. It's not the thinking, logical brain. That actually develops a little bit later on. Here's the thing, right? The reason why giving myself permission to feel makes me more resilient, just think back to when you are struggling, right, emotionally. And when you're like feeling so sad and heavy and like you can't get out of bed. When we are in an emotional state, it's really hard for us to take the lead of our own self because it's difficult to even think rationally, right? Because the emotional part of the brain is the one that's being engaged. All the attention goes to the emotions, right? There is a story in this book called Emotional Intelligence about this guy who intruded someone's house, tied these poor people up, these roommates up, and they said something, and this guy just had like an emotional reaction and started stabbing these roommates. And when, this already happened, this person got interrogated and they were saying like, wow, I literally do not know what got into me. So this person wasn't even like conscious. They weren't like aware. They just kind of like did things out of emotion, right? There's something in their body that's like driving them to do these things. So when we give the permission to ourselves to feel, they're not gonna bleed into our daily life. It's not gonna keep bleeding and like worrying in the background for when you are trying to, do things with your life. So what this actually looks like in real life, giving myself permission to feel, is usually I step away to my safe place. I try to at least spend like 5 minutes just lying on the bed, paying attention to my breath, paying attention to all the sensations that are happening in my body. The pounding in my head, the heaviness of my breathing, the stabbing in my chest. I try to at least give myself 5 minutes to feel instead of grabbing the fucking remote, putting on YouTube to distract myself. This also looks like preparing myself for when I get dysregulated and I'm like with another person. Having a list of things to say. So when I'm feeling dysregulated, I would like stop myself and say, hey, I'm feeling dysregulated. I'm gonna step away before I say anything mean, before I say anything that I regret. That's it. Once you are more level-headed, then you can step back into the conversation. The next one is putting on a neutral lens. So, what this actually looks like is I try to use more descriptive versus judgmental language. So for example, I feel like we have such a habit, right, of saying, that is good, that is bad. I'm a good friend, I'm a bad friend. We even, to small children, we say that, oh, so-and-so is such a good girl. And what does that even mean? When we say that a child is good, what that simply means is that that child is not making my life that little bit harder, right? That child is good because I don't have to feel these difficult emotions. Everything always boils down to that. But anyway, so an IRL example, I struggle really, really hard with texting. Sometimes I make up all these excuses. Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm such a bad friend. Or like, hey, I'm sorry it took me this long to reply to you. I'm just such a bad texter. But really what that actually means factually, right? If we're just describing that situation, is that I take a long time to reply to people. That's what it is. Because like, if you're just thinking about what is a good friend or what is a good communicator, that is so vague, right? That could mean so many different things. The reason that putting on a more neutral lens helps me to become more resilient, it's really moving away from shame. When I have this habit of describing things, describing other people, I then do not judge myself. I do not use judgmental language towards myself. This really helps because oftentimes what keeps me stuck and want to give up are actually the stories that I have in my head about what it means about myself.
I'm coming on here because I've been feeling a little bit too inside my head. My head and ego is storytelling. So this is my way of saying to my mind and ego, no thanks, I don't want to hear your story. I don't need it.
Because here's the thing, right? There's a difference between guilt and shame. So guilt is I did something bad, whereas shame is I am bad. So using descriptive language helps us move away from that shame, because how can you change if that is who you are, if you are judging yourself or other people or other things for something that they did which isn't themselves, and you judge them as, okay, they did this thing, so that means that they are this kind of person. So how the fuck can you change, right? If that is our essence, because that's what it implies when we use judgmental language, like using good, using bad, those kinds of words, okay? It's a lot easier for me to pick myself back up and keep going if I knew that my actions don't necessarily define me, even if they're good things. This is a big one. It's curiosity. The way that I perceive life has changed immensely once I become more curious about myself, about others, about my responses, about everything. But let's just use the example of feelings, because for me, that's what I struggle with the most. When I feel dysregulated, when I feel like an emotion is bubbling up, which takes a lot of practice in itself, I have this habit of reverting to self-enquiry. I take a deep breath and ask myself, okay, what is happening? You know, first of all, doing the body scan. We already talked about that in the last habit of giving permission to feel. The next step, what is making me feel this way? You know, what happened? What am I feeling? What part of myself is reacting to this? Because most of the time, I guess this is the process of getting to know the different parts of yourself too. So developing this habit of like inquiring the different parts of yourself, whether that be the inner child, the inner saboteur, whatever. What am I making this mean about myself? What am I making this mean about other people? Inquiring about these things helps me not personalize everything. When I became curious about myself, I always struggle with these stories that say that like I suck. And so again, back to the thing that I already mentioned in the other habit, it's really hard to change your essence when you think that that is who you are. Whereas when you inquire, when you're actually curious, you learn that it's actually not you. It's actually something that you learn. It's actually, you know, this started somewhere. You weren't like born coming out of the fucking vagina being like a bad person, or, you know, sucking at the guitar, you know? All these things are learned, and you can learn to do different things in your life. And being curious helps you with that. Hey, this is a big one. It's self-compassion. Self-compassion is fucking huge to cultivating resilience. At least if you have a habit of beating yourself up. At least if you have a habit of punishing yourself. And that's not necessarily your fault. You know, likely that was how you were treated when you were a child, right? You have to achieve, you have to perform. I talked about this in my video about how I learned to love exercising. Link up here if you want to check it out. But the reason why I was able to have a habit of exercising, even though I fucking hated moving as a child, like my cousin would always like make fun of me because I'm such a lazy see, that's judgmental language right there. I'm such a lazy child. I was not a lazy child. I
didn't enjoy moving. I like sitting on the couch. I like more stagnant activities like playing games.
And now, as an adult, I was able to cultivate this habit of exercising and even changing that whole relationship to movement and actually loving it. It's because I learned self-compassion. I learned to forgive myself. I learned to speak more kindly towards myself instead of using punishment. And rough harshness to motivate myself. So I motivate myself through kindness because I'm a human and I'm learning and I deserve kindness. I deserve softness. I deserve to live life with ease, you know? So that is a lot more motivating than, whipping yourself to do something, right? That to me makes me a lot more resilient. And don't get me wrong, that shit works, right? Some of us, we are super motivated by violence, right? That's why a lot of us do it. That's why we have it in our pockets. On the other hand, though, it doesn't have to be like that because it's painful, right? And I have learned that life just doesn't have to be that way. I don't have to experience so much pain unnecessarily. Don't get me wrong, pain is just part of life. Even with the things that we desire, pain is always going to be there. There's always that risk. But sometimes we put a lot more pain than necessary. And it doesn't have to be like that. And that just helps me to keep going. So if you're like me and you are starting to get tired, you're starting to get exhausted of inflicting self-violence and things still not working, you know that deep down you are capable of so many things, even though that voice is still very, very low because that really mean, harsh voice is so much louder, then I want to offer you a free 30-minute call with me, the Break the Cycle game plan, and we'll figure something out for you. So you don't have to struggle alone. I am here. It's free. All you have to do is go to the description down below, fill out the form so that I know your situation, because the thing is, I'm not gonna do this for everyone, to be completely honest with you. I want to see if I can actually help you, and then we'll have that 30-minute call. Okay, we're gonna create a game plan to break the cycles that you are just stuck in your life. Let's break it. So I really hope that I will see you again soon, maybe in the call or maybe in another video. Maybe you can check this one out. Okay? See you!